Correct vote.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair. Commissioner Scott, he's out on some business, so he let us know ahead of time that he was going to be out, and so we'll excuse him. And then Commissioner Stinson. Commissioner Montoya. Commissioner Mayers. Commissioner Bacon.
Present.
All right, and Vice Chair Metcalf.
Present.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Minutes of January 10th, 2024. Did I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from January 10th, 2024,
As corrected?
as corrected.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? New business, election of officers.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if I may, since we have so many new members and usually at the beginning of the year, we go ahead and select or leave the officers in place. Of course, we don't have a chair, but our vice chair is acting in that capacity right now. So what the process is generally someone makes a motion to appoint a chair and then somebody seconds it. And then it goes for a vote and then go for the vice chair. Just depends on if there's no second, then you ask for another, nomination and go from there. And I'll ask our esteemed attorney if that's correct. He seems to agree with me.
Not esteemed.
So,
I'll handle it.
sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any nominations for chairman?
I will nominate you since you're doing such a good job, so
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any other nominations? There being none, all in favor of me as chairman, say aye.
aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And Mr. Chair, as Phil said also, Commissioner Tom Scott said if you wanted him to serve on one of these, he would also. So his vice chair or whatever. So he just put his name out there.
Do I hear a nomination for vice chairman?
I'll nominate Tom Scott.
Your second? I'll second. Motion's been made and seconded to elect Tom Scott. Are there any other nominations? Supposed to ask that 3 times, but I'm not going to. Okay, all in favor of Tom Scott as vice chairman, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Notify Mr. Scott that he is now the vice chairman.
Mr. Chair, we will do that.
Thank you. Next order of business. Factory cartridge for a manufactured home and agricultural home district located at 964 North Blakeman Place, Coolidge, and as is situated southwest of the intersection of West Hawkeye Road and North Blakeman Place. APN number 209-19-007C. Rest of vote.
Chairman, Commission members, in order to install a manufactured home in the city of Coolidge, if it's not in a manufactured home park, you have to apply for a conditional use permit. And there's some requirements in the zoning code. The unit has to be ground set, it can't be over 3 years old, and, of course, meet setbacks and those type of requirements. And it's In the zoning district, it then has to be allowed as a conditional use. So in this area, which is west of Skousen Road, out it's about half a mile to the west of Skousen and Mbakayen. This area is zoned agriculture, I believe, so I'll let, so Phil will fill you in on the specifics of it. And as far as I know, we haven't had anybody comment against it, right, Phil? I don't think we had any call.
No, in fact, the only inquiry that we had on it was Laura Blakeman, and she said we have no objections and we are in favor of the conditional use permit request being approved. So I read that into the record. This isn't too complicated. We've got the applicant and the applicant's representatives here in the audience. We'll keep this nice and short. Here's the subject site, as Gilbert was explaining, for our site exhibit here. The general plan area shows that everything within the area is in the urban neighborhood land use designation in all the yellow. And then you can see the green here, that is the agricultural designation as a zoning, all surrounded by planned area development zoning, interestingly enough. So here are a couple of photos, and if it's in the report, let alone the overhead, I realize that's not the access rod, it's access road. Saw it a little earlier. So we got a couple of photos here looking generally southwest from Vikian Road across the site. This photograph right here is looking south from West Vikian Road again, but along the property frontage. And here we're just kind of sliding down a little bit, generally looking southwest, so you can get an idea of what's generally out there. This is basically the site plan that was provided to us. We have Vikian Road up here. North is this, north is this direction. As you can see, an existing inventory of conditions from plants, different types of usages on the site, and the proposed, battery's dying. Anyway, the proposed manufactured home is right here. So well situated in the middle of a fairly large property, will have no impact upon any of the surrounding. And the access is to come in here, and the applicant will have a paved surface here as reviewed through the building permit process. So they gave us a nice bit of detail here. So some of that detail that we usually ask for, just so that we can be sure of some of the other requirements. Once again, it's to be ground set. The example of the four-sided architecture is here. These are actual photos of a similar product that the representative actually has in their inventory. This is also the trim color and the base color to show you what it would be like, similar to this example here. And just, we ask them to share the floor plan detail with us, just so we can be sure that when they do come in and submit for the building permit, that it is in line with what was approved for the conditional use permit. So that's basically the nuts and bolts. As I said, they're here to answer any questions. And at this time, I turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Good evening, sir. My name is Marcus Wood. I work for Factory Expo Homes, 5757 Palo Verde, Tucson, Arizona.
Is there anything extraordinary going to happen with this application? I mean, other than the home going to be ground set, is there anything else, any other outbuildings going to be built?
No, not whatsoever. As far as what we're in control of, anything that's additional in the future after the home is set is not going to be associated with us in our install. No, we've been working on this project for some time. I've been working with Phil. Terry and I have been doing our due diligence to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements, which are a double wide instead of a single wide. This home is not only newer than 3 years, it's a brand new home. It's being manufactured in Riverside, California. The build time is about 1 month. We're going to be doing a ground level set, and that is all part of the bid that we're going to have already accomplished through L&H setup. The ground level set, if you're not familiar with the process, some of you may be, some of you may not be. The difference is there's going to be an excavation on the site. So the home is backed into that pit. They call it pit set or ground level set. And then they basically set it up the same way as a regular home would be set, but now the home is set in a pit. Commonly, there will be a green board that will surround the perimeter of the home, so when they backfill to it, that'll keep the earth from flowing into the underbelly of the home. In this case, the type of ground level set we're doing, we're taking it one step further, and we're going to be doing a block wall, perimeter wall. So it's kind of the next level. It's more of a reinforcement against that earth home. So you'll end up with basically one step into the home. It's a nice clean finish, really the preferred way to set the home.
I'm just trying to, for the connections for the home, are you gonna set them within that pit, or how is it gonna be? I'm looking at the plan here, and I see the underground electrical junction box, the electrical service post, things like that, and I can understand how this works,
Sure.
being a contractor myself, but how are they going to be doing those connections?
Okay, that's a good question. And what's unique and really nice about the situation that we're in now is that the property really is prepared and ready for utility hookup all across the board. You'll see on that plot plan the placement of the septic line or the septic tank in the leach fields. Okay, that's already in place. Many times before a permit's even submitted for, it's just a septic design. In this case, that is already in place. So that component of it, there's just going to be simple trenching running from the intake of the septic tank to the mobile home itself. As far as the power goes, I don't see exactly where the power pole is in the 200 amp connection.
Right there in that corner up on
Yes. So that's a 200 amp pole and panel. The standard home is built 100 amp service with gas. There is no gas on this site. This is an all electric home. All the appliances, including the furnace and the hot water heater, will be electric. So there will be trenching from that pole, and then it'll go to conduit that is actually fed underneath. The conduit connection is actually underneath the backside of the manufactured home and runs up. So it's underground trenching, and then it then flows into the bottom of the home where the actual conduit hookup connection is.
Okay, so you have a conduit that's sticking out from inside the mobile home down. Under
Yes. Yeah, your fuse box is inside the utility room, and right adjacent to that, you'll have conduit that flows underneath, and that's where you also have a water access as well.
I'm just making sure, kind of understanding. So this conduit, obviously the trenching's gonna happen straight from the power pole, 200 amp service, conduit going underneath. I get that. My question is it going to be installed before they do the kit?
No. So what'll happen as far as time frame goes, and they might, because I'm not here to speak, well, in a way, I'm here to speak on behalf of the setup contractor, but in terms of the logistics and the process of how they're going to set the home and how they're going to coordinate this, I'm going to tell you how I think it'll happen. First of all, after the permit is obtained, not the conditional permit, but the actual building permit is obtained, we'll order the home. The home will take about 1 month to build. Usually in a ground level set situation, they will then take out the tractors and the materials needed to start to prep the site for the incoming home. That usually happens about a week before the home actually reaches the site. Now, since they're actually going to have an excavation team out there, a backhoe, at that point, they may do some additional trenching since they have those materials on site at that time. Or they might do the trenching when the actual home gets there. I'm not sure when they're actually going to do the trenching.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I used to inspect manufactured homes for Pinal County, so a little different on the building code on these. They're done to HUD standards, so when the trenching goes in, then you have a flex that's waterproof that goes up, and it goes into the house, like you said. The only difference is you have an extra ground wire that can either go into like a UFR. You can go into the block that they're laying on the outside, or you do two 8-foot ground rods, 6 foot apart, I believe it is, depending on what the soil test comes up as, and that will determine that when it's going by the soil type. And so we require, because of our soil, sometimes we have to have 2 8-foot ground rods or UFR, which works too. So just depends.
And I understand that.
Yeah, yeah, you're an electrician, so I figured it's just that sometimes, back when I, for the city of Chandler, I actually had to make a presentation to the building inspectors because it wasn't done exactly how the building department, HUD has a little different standards that you can do that aren't like the building code, but they're enforced by the city. So we go through all that. Our people, our building officials trained and our inspectors are trained, so.
Yeah, and that's, I'm just trying to understand, if the conduit run itself is gonna be anywhere in that pit area.
Right, so not necessarily, because the pit is gonna be just right here around the perimeter of the home. Looking at this here, this is the front of the home, so the drop should be right about here. So I don't know the accuracy, I don't wanna provide that information, you may know better than myself, but I can tell you as far as the block retaining wall, it's a state-approved plan. And I think somewhere within this plan, it might talk about how that conduit runs through the actual perimeter wall. I'm not sure. I think it may drop through the wall. Again, I'm not sure. And then it comes out, and then you'll have the trenching to the. So I'm not sure in terms of the.
When you go straight to the back, right there on that corner, there's an electrical service post.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's gonna, power company's gonna come in, that box on the corner, come down, come to the service post, that's where the meter will be and the breaker.
I'm just trying to make sure that the connection's on like the exterior of the house and not trying to run underneath, because somehow some mobile homes and manufactured homes have that panel within like the center of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought is, as well, if they're trenching this, now the requirements for them digging underneath are farther.
Right. So instead of having an exposed conduit underneath the home, they would then be digging deeper into the pit and then covering up where that conduit is going to run. No, because the actual conduit drop is on the exterior wall of the home.
Trying to make sure I understand
Mhm.
correctly, because I've seen it, manufactured homes just, they run it underneath their house, and I've seen it walk,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just conduit just sitting there.
Yeah, which I think you'll see with almost 100% of manufactured homes going forward is those utility drops, other than the sewer. Some manufactured homes do it differently. They'll actually have drops straight down underneath where the bathrooms are. Some will have it unified and run to the exterior of the home, but what you'll see is almost all manufactured homes going forward is that conduit drop and the water inlet is going to be on the exterior wall of the home.
That's just what I wanted to understand, just to clarify.
Thank you.
Bill, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
They have to adopt an ordinance. No, it's a resolution. Yeah, it's called up here.
Gilbert, you got anything else you wanna add?
Mr. Chair, I think everything was covered well. Yeah, everything that goes into these houses has to have flex in case the unit moves a little bit. So that was the big, there's nothing rigid connected to the house. It has to have flexes in the water, electrical, everything. So I think it did a good job of explaining it, so.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the meeting to the public. Anyone that would like to speak on this, please come to the podium. No one? Close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve OPZ 23-12-51 and Resolution 2402.
Motion's been made to approve OPZ 23-12-51 and resolution 1202. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
We can go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
UPZ 240101, zoning text amendment to change the city of Coolidge Code Article 3, Section 302, definition, marijuana uses, as deleted in its entirety and replaced with the following marijuana uses. Shall include collectively marijuana cultivation facilities, medical marijuana dispensaries, marijuana dispensary cultivation facilities, dual license marijuana dispensaries, and marijuana infusion facilities.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I can have our, he told me not to call him esteemed, but I have a legal legal attorney here. He can update you on, this is a correction, really, a slight change. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, gets a little confusing when you just see deleted in its entirety and replaced with a sentence that means nothing. So I can point out the actual change that is occurring is the addition of one word, and it is medical, before marijuana dispensary. So on that second line of the definition, it now says medical marijuana dispensaries, whereas before it just referred to.
Okay,
That is the sole change.
that's a total change.
That is the total change.
Okay? Any questions up here before I open it to the public? I know Tom's not gonna say anything. You'll get to see it later. I know. Okay. Since this is a public hearing, I'm gonna open it to the public. Anyone that would like to speak, please come to the podium. Nope. Okay. No one comes. I'm gonna close the public hearing. Do I hear a motion?
A motion to approve Cool PZ 24-0101 as presented with the change discussed.
And resolution?
No resolution.
No resolution, okay.
This one. I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next section, open meeting law and roles of a planning and zoning commissioner.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we wanted to get you started on some training, and so what we did is we included, this is kind of some good reading, but it's from the League of Cities and Towns. It talks about a public official and some of the duties, and we also have a longer presentation, but Nick will pick things out of that, and he'll go over the open meeting law. And then coming up, we'll have other things for you. I've called some of the other cities I worked with before, City of Chandler, City of Glendale. They have some videos and some handouts that I can give you. Today, we'll just work on the open meeting law, but we'll also come up with different things to talk about PADs, zoning ordinances, things like that, so you can get more familiar with it. Go forward. I know two of you have done this for quite a while. But the others of you, I think it'll be useful, so you can see and you can ask questions and as we go forward. So hopefully we'll have Nick launch off on the open meeting here.
Can I say something first, Nick?
Please.
Please, I'm gonna give you a real swift definition. Don't three of us ever get together and sit down at a table and start talking, because we have just broke the law. If you mention anything about what goes on here, you can talk, but you better not mention anything that's going on at the meetings. Three of you. Two of you, you better watch out too, because you can cause all kinds of problems. It's best to not mention anything that goes on here when you're talking to some. If I meet Phil at Tags and we sit down and have a cup of coffee, we better have a cup of coffee. That's it.
Yeah, and what I would say is, even though we're down currently a member, we still got to count them. So it is 4. The quorum will be 4 members.
Okay.
And Phil, if you can, I provided this. This is mainly for public officials. Usually that's going to be city council that gets elected, but it has a lot of good information that can be useful. Contrary to what Gilbert might say, I don't like to hear myself talk. So if there's any questions you have as we're going through this, please stop me, yell at me, so I can answer this. I know this is an 80 slide presentation. I will not be that thorough because not all of it is going to apply to this commission. I'm picking out what I think is the highlights, the must-knows. Phil, if you can go to slide 11. Okay, so in Arizona, as in general, it's a very public policy is to have open meetings so that the public can witness how business is done. That's a gathering in person through technological means of a quorum, which, as I just went over, is 4 people. A meeting can also be electronic. So what can happen and has happened for other jurisdictions is someone will send out an email to 4 members or the entire commission and respond back and forth. That's a meeting, and that's a technical violation of the statute. As we just went over, it's 4. Now I got to go to 23. This is all notice requirements. That's typically done by Norma, and Phil will do that for purposes of our meetings.
Phil's our Norma.
This is something to keep in mind, like the chairman pointed out, if you're at a social gathering, it typically happens, there's a contentious zoning matter coming up. You might be somewhere where it gets discussed that, hey, I know that you're going to be rezoning a piece of land for solar or for a CUP for a marijuana establishment. You can talk about it with the public. Just keep in mind, if you're at a gathering where there are 4 other members and you guys are all standing around each other, it can be construed to be a violation because you're having a meeting that other people should be able to witness. It doesn't come up all that often. The other thing I would say is, don't feel like if you want to attend the council meeting, that is a public meeting, so you can attend. That's not a big deal. Does not matter that there's 4 of you there. If some city events, what Norma will do is she'll post a possible quorum, just to let the public know that there might be 4 members of Planning and Zoning Commission or 4 members of the City Council that might be in attendance.
And she always states in that notice that no official, so the public knows that you may gather there, but you're not going to make decisions and talk about cases.
Okay. This is our biggest point. If it's not on an agenda, we can't talk about it. And I know Gilbert does a very good job of providing updates about what could be coming to town and where things are in the works, and that's fine. He can provide the update, and I know everyone wants to ask the follow-up question, is that coming before us? When's it coming before us? What can we see? All of that kind of stuff. We shouldn't be talking about it. His one-way communication with the update is fine. What you can do is direct him to provide updates in the future, or you can always go talk to him after the meeting. There's nothing wrong with that. You can always reach out to staff after the fact. There's nothing wrong with that. Just keep in mind, that's the simplest thing. If it's not on, don't.
And that little box right up there is recording everything, except it's not going on the air. The channel's down.
Right, not right away.
This is an interesting one that might come up. The public has the right to, unless it is a public hearing, zoning text amendment, the public does not have a right to speak. They have a right to attend, they have a right to watch, they don't generally have a right to speak. Call to the public is not statutorily required. It has been the city's policy at council level and here to have it regardless and still allow the public the opportunity to speak. But it is one kind of a misnomer that I can go speak before any meeting that I want to. Now, if it is like I said, a public hearing, yes, we have to give them the right to speak. Obviously, it can be limited to time because they can't speak for hours on end to hold up public business. Mr. Chair.
3 minutes is the rule.
3 minutes is what our rule is. And I've been in many meetings where they've gone well over and had to get shut down.
Yep.
We do that. Oh, this is going to take forever. Oh, executive sessions. There we go.
I got a
One-
question to ask you.
Yeah.
We had one meeting one night that it was contentious as the devil. And we had a guy sitting out there that he got up and spoke, said his piece, went back and sat down, and we got ready to close the public section, and he made the statement, well, we're wasting our damn time being here because these guys has got their minds all made up and they're going to do whatever they want to do. Now, can you stop somebody from doing something like that? That's disrupting of the meeting. I mean, the whole audience was full, and he made that statement. And I was mad. I wanted to go out there and have a talk with him because we didn't have our minds made up. And, you know, how do you handle that?
Well, so now, Mr. Chair, welcome to your position
know.
as Mr. Chair.
I know how I can handle it now.
You are in charge of controlling the meeting. If there is people in the audience that are disruptive, I think the first step would be to request everyone to be quiet. Usually it's a general audience request. Hey, please let us deliberate, let the person speak, whoever is, what's going on, what have you.
Come
And
back
then
to
you
the
can
mic.
give a directed to the individual that is noticeably making the noise. And then after that, you can have them escorted out of the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if we see some, I remember we had a marijuana case that was kind of, out of hand. So we went and got PD to just be present, to just keep it calmed down, and it worked. All they had to do was stand back there and people kind of settled down.
Yeah.
So if we need to do that, we can. We as staff watch that, and we've been around.
That's what it was.
Yeah, so, and I've seen where the chair will say, stamp the gavel and say, please, we need order. You've already had your chance to speak, and we're moving forward, and that kind of works. It's up to the chair, but
Yeah.
I've seen that work pretty well.
Okay, so moving on to what my realm is the most important area of a public meeting is the private meeting, the executive session. It is permitted specifically for legal advice. For us, it would be legal advice regarding a project or an item, maybe a possible condition of approval. It is not open to the public. It does have to be agendized. So for example, our agenda tonight has a very vague statement on the top of it that says that we can go into an executive session on any of the items listed on the agenda. So if something came up during tonight's text amendment that I believed or any member on the commission believed warranted legal advice, we could adjourn this meeting and go into a conference room or remove our solitary audience member to obtain legal advice, and we can speak more freely about that. The contents of the executive session are strictly confidential. They can only be discussed amongst yourselves or with legal counsel or whoever else was present. Usually it's the designated representatives of the city, which would be Gilbert, and we'll let Phil in as well.
So it's a timeout.
It is a timeout from the public meeting to get legal advice and come back out. no voting and no actual action can take place in there. There are there's strict penalties and violations if you violate that. From my perspective, the biggest issue if we share confidential information is it loses its confidentiality. Someone else knows what's going on. They know that was given. That's our biggest issue. But it is so if you feel during a topic it's getting very contentious, or you think, I'm not sure if this is legal or not, you can always, ask if I think it's appropriate to go into executive session. There will still need to be a vote and a second to go into into executive session. Typically that, if someone feels the need and if I agree, usually the vote does occur. On occasion, if we know there's a contentious issue, we will go ahead and place it on the agenda ahead of time to try to provide that legal advice before the item is discussed.
Okay.
Okay, how do I go? Can I go faster than this or no? We're not going to have personal matters before P and Z. Come on. Who made this, Phil?
Battery's a little low. It's also the program.
Okay, finally. I did mention this earlier, but it is important to note. I hate to pick on people, but let's just say Phil mentions to Al that he's going to vote a certain way, and then Al mentions down the line to Doug that he's going to vote a certain way. You're creating a vote behind the scenes, which is a violation. So even if just two of you are talking about an item, that alone is not a violation. One of you then goes and talks to two more, you've got four. And that's the violation. So doesn't come up all that often. And again, it's not wrong to talk about the issues and talk about the topics and the agenda items. Just be cognizant that it could create an issue in the future. We already talked about electronic communications, and then I got to go forward another 20 pages. And this is the last one. I do not mean this any harshly, but this is not, I'm not trying to scare anyone. There is just violations that the state mandates. Open meeting law violations are investigated by the Attorney General's office or the Pinal County Attorney's office for us here in Pinal County. Obviously, if you ever think that you've committed one, please contact our office immediately so we can. There's ways to try to rectify the situation. For example, if there was a vote taken, I don't anticipate that here at P&Z level, but if there was ever that type of issue, we could bring an item back for ratification to bring it back into the public light to ratify what happened. Any other questions, issues?
I had a issue like that just recently. Our HOA management company did some things, and during an open session, we said the board decided to try to get different management companies to interview. And that was done during open session. Between the last open session and one that is coming up, we interviewed different companies and also took a vote.
Yeah.
And we're going, we violated the open meeting law. So now we have to, during the next open session, have to ratify, which I guess is legal, but.
Right. It optically, it looks bad because you're going to have to put it on an agenda, what you're doing, admit that the mistake was made, and then ask and one, really find out if someone from the public's going to come in and question it. Because worst case scenario would be you're trying to ratify something that has zero public support. Any other questions, concerns?
There's one item we want to bring up to you that maybe on
Go
page
ahead.
60, see if this thing works. Yeah. It talks about just, let's see, if we can find it here. One more, right? Is it? Here it is. Yeah, so you want to talk about it?
Sure. Having done zoning a long time in many different states and jurisdictions, both in the public and the private sector, one thing that I always tried to represent, whether I was submitting on behalf of a client to a public agency or working in the public sector, was the fact that it is an application that has a certain amount of materials and graphics and different information to it in order to have standing, even for the application. Further to that, when we as staff start going through it and working with like what the lots are going to look like, what the building's going to be like for a major site plan or something like that, anything that comes before this body and subsequently also the city council, we get it to that place of sort of massaging it to be as good of a proposal as we can have it. In other words, long story short, when it gets here, it has standing. And that's based upon that factual information relative to those requirements that's also in the zoning code, compliant with the general plan, and maybe some other additional department policies and other practices. So based upon that, when we bring the stuff to you, even it may be stuff that we don't think necessarily is the greatest thing in the world as far as like, oh, like I like hamburger stands, but I hate hot dog stands. It doesn't matter that if they meet the criteria to have standing and can be put forward of this body for approval, it essentially has sort of warranted itself, but it obviously is portions that must go through the public hearing and the input and the discussion to facilitate that. And it's very important to keep that in that frame of reference versus how one's opinion might be. Like I said, actually like hot dogs, but that was just the best example I could come up with. So that kind of.
So in a shortened version, we won't bring anything to you that isn't legally able to come before you. We won't let it get past us. And then we also have our attorney that will review those things. So just so you know, that's part of the process of how we get things to you. And, so if there's ever any questions, you can always ask us, but.
Well, and I would add, there's, especially at the planning and zoning commission and city council stage, usually the public might come in and they get very, very upset about an apartment complex or whatever the proposed project is. Typically, everyone comes in, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the position you take, at the site plan stage. At the site plan stage, we're not really talking about whether or not an apartment complex can go there or a restaurant can go there, single-family homes. We're talking about, are they complying with what our code says? Do they have the setbacks? Are they exceeding height? All of that. If they have an issue, if there's an issue with the use itself, the underlying use, not who's operating that use, not that it's a Burger King versus just a regular restaurant, that has to be discussed during the zoning stage. And typically, most people don't come in at that stage for whatever reason. They're still getting notice because they live near it. It could be that, they're getting this, they see what the site plan is going to look like. And they see a 150 unit apartment complex, and I don't want that. But just because they're seeing pictures, they think I'm going to come in. At that stage, the questions really aren't revolving around, do we want this here or not? It's, are they complying with code? There is some leeway, if there's a lot of opposition, maybe the neighbors to one side might say, hey, I get that they're complying with setbacks, but that's a 3-story, building and they can see into my backyard. There is some leeway that the city has to enforce a little bit more strict conditions on it, to mitigate the harm or potential harm to the neighbors. Maybe it could be more trees, additional setbacks. There is a little bit of wiggle room in that regard, but we're not discussing effectively whether or not there can be an apartment complex there or a restaurant. That had already been decided. And so I think Gilbert and I and Phil were talking about it at some point, maybe once a meeting or every few meetings, we'll kind of go through the different stages of development, because I think that'd be beneficial, starting with, we just had several long presentations of the general plan. What is the general plan and how does that factor into what the city does? You know, because the general plan is what guides staff to try to say, this is where we want this development. At the zoning stage, it's what's permitted, what's allowed to use. And then at the site plan stage, this is exactly how it's going to look, so that when they come in for building permits, if they don't comply with that, they have to come back here to get it changed. But that, I think that's we were talking about for a meeting, or possibly?
Yeah, we could bring,
The same thing, like, for example, at the last meeting when we saw, the apartments, and they had it wasn't, it wasn't this, it wasn't.
There's a
this-
PAD.
Yes, the PAD. Will we then, does that circle back around to us later in the process?
So it's a good question. It all depends.
yeah, it's a
yes.
size, depends on if it's a major site plan, yes, absolutely. There's some there's some minor adjustments to some sites that are existing. We may handle that in-house because they're already there. So they may just have a small something to do, but most of them do come back to you as a site plan. Now, I don't want to sound like you're responsible for looking at the codes. We do that. We provide you, that's why we provide you the recommendation. We say, we think we recommend approval on this based on these stipulations. This is what we're asking for as staff to comply with the rules. And we may try to hit it off and say, like Nick was saying, we say, this is going to get some property. They don't like 3 stories, so we recommend you go 1 story, 2, then 3, and put more landscaping in. They may say, nah, we don't want to do that because then the numbers don't work. So we'll still recommend it to you, and we'll say, okay, well, P&Z is probably going to ask for that, so we'll see. And then they'll come before you, and we may say as staff, we recommend more foliage to block the view, or we think the windows should be turned the other way. And we've done that before, so that's just part of that process, the site plan.
We're just like a separation of duties, like you guys do all the work, and we're here to represent the community or the city,
Right.
and
And make recommendations to the council. The council is relying on you to look at this for them. And then not all things go before the council. Site plans stop with you unless there's an appeal. If somebody doesn't like what happened, then they refer it to the council. But certain things, site plans
Yeah.
don't, conditional use permits don't.
So I would start with, so let's start with the general plan. This body is a recommending body. So if someone wants to change the general plan, small section of it from employment to residential, there's a public hearing. You'd recommend approval or denial. Council makes the final call. Zoning is the same thing, recommending body. So you could recommend denial, or you can recommend approval, and then it'll go on to council for final. Site plan, it is a final decision for planning and zoning. If a site plan is denied, it can be appealed to city council. Then we also have, if there's a subdivision involved, pre-plats, our final body is here, and that's solely because there's no homes being built with the pre-plat. There's going to be additional design and engineering work that's allowed once you obtain the pre-plat, but the final plat will go before council. And that's when it gets stamped and all the homes can be built.
And that's why they depend on us to weed out all the problems before it gets to the council, so that the council can say yes or no without even blinking an eye. They'll ask questions, but it's going to be, they're going to know that we did our homework here. So that's why it's so important for us to dig into things and ask the right questions and try to find out the right or wrong answers.
And the pre-plats, Mr. Chair, if I may, have to stay very close to when it goes to the final. It can't change between the pre-plat and the final plat to the council. It has to be really consistent all the way across, and we make sure that that occurs. Because, and they have a certain timeline they have to submit the plat. You can grant an extension for them if they're having problems for whatever reason financially or getting to build the roads and put in the sewer lines, all that. That may come back before you. A while back, that was, we considered giving that authority to the city manager just to expedite the process, but then it was decided by P&Z, no, we want to see that, and that's where we kept it here. So if there is an extension of some sort, it would come back to you for that on a pre-plat. So just so you know. Yes.
So when you see the big sign on the property that you're driving past that says there's a public hearing, is that at the PAD or is that at the site plan or is that the city council meeting?
It depends. It's for all of the above. So if there's a sign out there, the code's gonna require public notice, and that includes mailing notice to property owners within 600, 300 feet. There's gonna be a newspaper, advertisement, and I get that not a lot of people read the newspaper anymore. And then the sign will be updated to include the date of the public hearing.
And online, we also post it. Yeah, so some require 10-day notice, others 15. So we have to check with sorry, so some require 10-day notice, some require 15-day notice, depends on how what the code that was adopted in the zoning code. City code items also to change, like the marijuana, that has a different timeline. And we don't have to go as far, but it still has to go before you, then the city council.
Depending on
Right.
what it is.
Yeah, and a lot of that's based on ARS statute. The legislature creates the timelines and what we have to do to comply for us and the counties. So, and it's not always the same. Some of the rules for the counties are different from the city, so we have to make sure that,
Right.
well, we had one change that we proposed on land splits and Nick caught it and said, you can't do that. We were trying to be consistent with the county. And we were surprised that we weren't allowed to do that by ARS statute. Cities aren't allowed to do what the counties can do at certain things.
And I want to point out one other thing, PADs, because it also came up the last meeting. A PAD is a specific zoning district. Generally, it's a lot easier for them to just copy paste large, swaths of our zoning code for the standards, just because it's easier. But what they are doing is they're creating their own zoning code for that piece of land. And that could be increased height, it could be decreased setbacks, there's any number of things. There's supposed to be some give and take as to why the city would accept that. Usually you get more amenities, more open space, more, it could be wider roads, it could be
Commercial track.
commercial
that we
pieces.
normally
There's any
wouldn't get.
number of things that you're supposed to be getting from that. And so that's one, when we talk about zoning or PADs, they're one and the same because they involve the same process.
Okay.
And we plan to bring back more specific things, general plan, and then back, PADs a little more in depth, and then that way the rezoning process. So since you have questions, we can answer them as you go forward. We always are available for questions, but that way you're kind of getting a little more into
And
the.
it's not a meeting if you call Gilbert down at the office and ask him a question.
Absolutely.
That's not considered.
We encourage it.
Yeah, we want you to do that and come see us or call us and all that.
He's not doing anything
Yeah.
all
What-
day.
What we don't want is a response, all right? What we do, we're careful when we send you out a notice and say, we're going to do this, it'll say on the bottom, please do not reply all, so that we don't violate the open meeting law. So we try to remind you in our emails to you, or else if we're careful, we may only send it to 2 at a time, just to not have the opportunity to violate the open meeting law. So there are ways we try to help you and not and keep out of trouble from Nick doesn't come chase us. What did you do, Gilbert? You said it to everybody. We're careful.
And if you get on the ragged edge and you think, I wonder if I'm going to get into trouble, look over there at Nick. He'll tell you whether you're going to get in. That's right. And if he says, stop right where you're at.
And I think it's important that we bring back these separately because the most difficult thing I see from P and Z in other jurisdictions as well is what can we discuss when? Because someone comes in to rezone a piece of property to be an apartment complex or to be solar or to be what have you. We shouldn't be discussing, and it's part of a application is a preliminary site plan, but we shouldn't be discussing specifics contained in there. We should be talking about big picture. Should this, does this circulation fit? Does this neighboring uses, is it impacted? There's items in our zoning code that kind of talk about what should be discussed essentially and what the decision is based on. And so we can go into more specifics for those, zoning, general plan, site plan, what can be discussed, what shouldn't be discussed. In general, I have not heard too alarming conversations or, the comments from this commission. I haven't heard that, way out of bounds or anything like that. And if I do feel that we're getting off track, I'll raise my hand. I'll just try to steer everyone back towards the conversation. Recently, we had to do it with a general plan where we started talking about an annexation. Annexation had occurred 8 months prior and was not something that was coming before this commission. It was not something that was even up for debate. It already occurred and something I didn't want to go down that route, so I just commented and steered everyone back on track. So. Any other questions? Hopefully that didn't scare you guys away from serving. It's only been a couple months.
No, just remember, there are some things that we know that we can't talk about. And if you can't talk about it, don't talk about it. That way you don't have to worry about any problems.
Yeah, we don't have as many executive session items as the council does. They tend to get more into it because they have so many things to look at. Taxes, executive, people, hiring, all kinds of things that have to be done in private by law.
Yeah.
And so, and it's because they're doing something that is required to do a certain way because they look at so many different things. It could be, property sales. It could be just about it. There's so many things. So luckily yours is on process and zoning and really important things, but you don't have to worry about all the other things. They do. Unless you run for office and get elected then.
We don't have any Nancy Pelosi's.
No. Yeah, so we'll be bringing some more things to you as time permits, and then we'll, let us know if there's something really interesting you want to learn more about. We can either provide you personally with some more information, or we can just put it, make sure we cover it in a future meeting. So, all right? Good. Mr. Chair, that's all we have on this item. Phil, do you have any? Oh, yeah. No, we're good. That's all we had on this item, Mr. Chair.
Any other business?
Just report.
I'm going to get to that. I just wanted to see if there was any other business that we wanted to bring up before we go to reports. Gilbert, you're on the floor again.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Of course, we started off the year, we got a lot going on. We've got about, we're starting to pick up again on single-family permits. It does seem like a lot, but I think we're at, let me look at the number. So on single-family homes, I think we're about 9 or 10. And then, so some of the builders are picking back up. It was Century Complete and Oakwood Homes. We also have Meritage looking to buy some lots and then actually do that. D.R. Horton, I think, is going to turn in some more lots as we go forward. of all the different types that includes the house, we had about 42 different permits, all types. Some are big, some are small, a lot of solar, rooftop solar, that kind of thing, fences, electrical permits, plumbing, you name it, we get all of them. So we've been pretty busy. A lot of projects in the pipeline. So that's all good. And then we have a lot of modifications that have taken place. Nicola's moving forward. They've got some with their hydrogen trucks. Procter & Gamble, we're waiting, they're still doing some internal work on their plans to submit the site plan and going forward. They told us not to worry, they're moving forward. They just, internally, they take their time and do things right. And so we'll eventually get that to you in site plan, because we constantly call them and we work with the county for the roads and all the other things we partner with. And so we, it's all, and then also when their foreign trade zone comes up, we need that site plan. So that goes before, we partner with City of Phoenix for that. And we have an intergovernmental agreement, and we need the site plan, because that goes to U.S. Customs Immigration, so you can, a lot of involved in that part of it. And have to go present in front of the schools, everybody that's taxing entity, and ask them to support the foreign trade zone. So that involves Picacho school districts, Eloy school districts, and everything that's down in that area. And everybody supports it because it brings so much revenue, additional revenue to the schools and to all those. So usually it's not a huge, sale. It's just when I think the Phoenix metro areas have a harder time when they propose a reduction in certain taxes on something that already is being taxed. They don't want to give that up. So schools don't do that. Here you don't, it's ag. They don't get hardly any tax from it, but now you're going to get 5% of something massive. So that's pretty good. And so that's how the foreign trade part of it. If you want more information on it, I can. But it basically does, it allows someone like Procter & Gamble or Nikola that imports parts, assembles trucks, and then they don't have to pay the tax, the duties until the truck is sold. So the site is treated as like the port of entry. So it's secure, has cameras, and can be inspected. So it's pretty cool the way it works. But it goes through a process to get there. And not all of them get that. Only companies like that are. And then part of our airport, we did that with Daycraft, which are military, weapons systems. And so that's pretty cool. And because we own the land underneath, it was strictly only for the product that gets shipped in, manufactured. When it's sold, that's when the duties are paid. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, I think it's pretty much all I have. Everything's moving forward. We're doing pretty good. We'll probably see, there's a fast food restaurant on the corner of Arizona Boulevard, about Cayenne on the northwest corner we're working on. So hopefully we'll get that to you. And as far as, it's already been approved though, so the site plan, everything's done. It's just switched to the ownership, but the site plan is already there, so we could just go forward with it. And so
We can use the other site plan we
yes,
approved then.
yes,
Okay,
because
good.
it's pretty much identical. So that was one of our incentives. Well, if you bring your restaurant here, the site's already approved by Planning and Zoning Commission. As long as you don't change it much, it can stay right here and there. They're like, because everybody already had the hearings, everything else, just a different name. Pretty good one, I think. So we'll see. It's kind of exciting. Burger King's still on hold as far as construction costs. That was in the paper. So I know so I'm hoping this other restaurant replaces that and it quit from getting attacked Burger King all the time. So anyway, that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Anybody?
Oh, the only other thing I'd add is that for our March 6, 2024 meeting, that will be where we're presenting the initial updates or the starting updates for the General Plan 2035. So hopefully with time and paper and, the right materials and stuff, we'll be giving you each a booklet that is 120 pages worth of the general plan. Most of it will be what the prior one was because it is a very good document. So there's just a few minor places for some updates, a few additions, maybe a couple pictures swap outs. We got pictures of P&G in there and Nikola now, and hopefully enough things that makes it look really good. So that'll start the 60-day comment period from other agencies that we have to send it out to. So that will start that portion. That completes on May 6th. The P&Z meeting right after that is May 8th. So we'll bring it right back to you guys and have considered any comments that came from the public or those other agencies. And upon a approved recommendation there, that would advance to the city council in June. And then we'd be having them adopted a little bit later in June, and that would go before the voters on November 5th later this year, after another 120-day waiting period. So it all starts next month.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? Tom? Come on. I asked Tom, now, this comes back to us. I asked Tom tonight how Nextera was doing around his house. Because that was a big problem that we had with Nextera and what they wanted to do and everything. Tom says he can't even see down to the 11 Mile Corner anymore. Because when the solar cells are standing straight up, you can't see. Because they're really putting in a bunch of them down there. They're hammering them in the ground. I bet that hammer driving those posts in the ground is enough to drive you nuts.
Well, that's pretty much done now.
Oh, is it?
That part of it, so it's just, the rest of it. Watching them slide around out there with pickups today, and I didn't even know that. But I mean, they were getting stuck out there, I just stood out there and laughed. That's Orster that we're talking about, next year is on the south. And one of their guys or something ended up in the canal out there too, so.
All in one.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? Can I have a motion? Motion? To adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
I
Aye.